Glove Corp closed the final quarter of FY22 in the red as escalating costs as well as normalisation in demand and average selling prices for gloves ate into its earnings. For the fourth quarter of FY22, Glove posted a net loss of 52.59 million ringgit compared to a net profit of 447.4 million ringgit last year. Revenue tumbled by 52.28% to 990.1 million ringgit. As for the full fiscal year, cumulative earnings plummeted by 96.94% to just 235.97 million ringgit, while top line contracted by 65.94% to 5.57 billion ringgit. Commenting on the group's financial results, Glove MD Lim Cheong Guan said the oversupply situation and weaker demand for gloves are short-lived. He added that the group's fourth quarter FY22 performance is not reflective of its business and sector's true potential, noting that the loss position it finds itself in is a temporary setback and is confident that the industry will recover. Glove said it has established mitigating measures, which include deferring all capital expenditure for new capacity in 2023. It is planning to direct efforts to recapture sales to the US. The glove maker also believes that once customers' stockpiles are depleted and restocking activity resumes, the market will stabilize and be better positioned to absorb the additional supply from new capacity. At the close, Glove shares traded unchanged at 70.5 cents, giving the group a market capitalization of 5.79 billion ringgit. The Socio-Economic Research Centre, or SERC, has revised upwards its GDP growth projection for Malaysia to 6.5% from an initial 5.2%, following steady growth in the second quarter of this year. Should its forecast be achieved, Malaysia's economy would expand at the fastest pace since 2010, when it recorded a growth of 7.4% year-on-year. Circ Executive Director Lee Heng Wei said the revision was made after second quarter GDP came in at 8.9% year-on-year. He said the momentum is expected to be sustained in the coming quarters, with growth seen coming in at between 8% and 9% in the third quarter, aided by low base effect, before easing to 4 to 5% in the final 3 months of the year. Earlier this month, Putrajaya said Malaysia's economic growth may surpass the official estimates of 5.3% to 6.3%, while S&P Global Market Intelligence projected in July a domestic GDP expansion of 7% this year due to strengthening domestic demand, strong exports and the reopening of international borders. Official data released today show that Malaysia's trade in the first 8 months of 2022 jumped 33.1% year-on-year to 1.873 trillion ringgit, with exports at 1.014 trillion ringgit, imports at 858.83 billion ringgit, and trade surplus at 155.57 billion ringgit. Still, Lee remains cautious on the strength of consumer spending amid rising inflation, higher cost of living and the tapering of consumption and cash flow from assistance measures. Against this backdrop, he said Malaysia's GDP is projected to grow at a slower pace of 4.1% next year. Finance Minister Tengku Datuk Sri Zafrul Abdul Aziz warns that the transition to the green agenda needs to be done gradually, as rapid changes can potentially bring negative spillover effects such as job losses. According to Bernama, Zafrul said the transition can somewhat pose a threat to businesses and livelihoods, particularly in ASEAN. Citing an International Labour Organization report, he said Southeast Asia could potentially lose around 500,000 jobs in fossil fuels by 2050, though it could gain around 5 million jobs, mainly in the renewable energy sector. Speaking at the Cooler Earth Sustainability Summit 2022, the minister cited Petronas and Tenaga Nasional's respective green agenda initiatives as examples. He noted that Petronas employs close to 50,000 workers all over the world, and their full ecosystem involves 4,000 vendors and suppliers who employ their own workers. Meanwhile, TNB employs about 40,000 workers and has around 3,200 vendors involved in its power generation business. Should the two companies pivot abruptly instead of making a gradual transition to green energy, Zafrul said workers and entire industries and communities would be affected. Therefore, he said, governments must implement a just transition policy for the affected population in order to ensure social protection, green recovery and skills redevelopment. AME REIT, which debuted on Bursa Malaysia today, has identified 3 more industrial properties for potential acquisition over the next 12 months from its sponsor AME Elite Consortium. Simon Lee, Chairman and Executive Director of REIT Managers, said these properties have a total gross floor area of 256,828 square feet and are located in AME Elite's industrial parks. REIT Managers is the management company of AME REIT. If the acquisition materializes, it would increase AME REIT's portfolio of assets to 37 investment properties from 34 currently. Lee said AME REIT is capable of acquiring up to 480 million ringgit worth of assets based on its gearing of 8% currently. Apart from AME Elite, Lee said the industrial-focused REIT is also assessing acquisitions from third parties. He believes the prospects of industrial real estate are bright, especially with upcoming demand arising from the pipeline of foreign direct investment into the country's 3 industrial areas, namely Penang, Klang Valley and Johor. Even with a rising interest rate environment, he said there are still opportunities, especially for under-rented properties and in the case of sales and leaseback. AME REIT ended trading today at RM1.16 per unit, 2.7% higher than its listing price of RM1.13. That gives it a market capitalization of 603.2 million ringgit. Petro Saudi International (PSI) is said to have pumped in $185 million of 1MDB monies into its subsidiary to pursue an oil exploration project with the Venezuelan government. Deputy Public Prosecutor Norina Bahadun said part of the funds was used to purchase drillship Discoverer in January 2010. She stressed that this venture between Petro Saudi Oil Services and the Venezuelan government would not have been possible without the transfer of the money, which originated from 1MDB and was part of the $1 billion that was injected into 1MDB Petro Saudi. Norina said this during submissions of the prosecution's bid to seek a court order to prohibit PSI founder and CEO Tariq Obaid and others from using over $340 million of alleged 1MDB money. Apart from the $340 million from PSI, Putrajaya is also seeking unspecified sums deposited under an intermediate account name Temple Fiduciary at Barclays Bank in the UK. The application was filed under Section 53 of the Anti-Money Laundering, Anti-Terrorism Financing and Proceeds of Unlawful Activities Act. It comes after Malaysia levelled charges in February 2020 on Tariq, PSI Director Patrick Mahoney, along with Loh Teck Jo for engaging in a criminal conspiracy involving former PM Datuk Sri Najib Razak and 1MDB.